Okay, it's 6 o'clock. I'd like to call the meeting to order. This is the Luzerne County Board of Elections and Registration regular meeting for June 12th, 2024. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We'll have roll call vote. Roll call. Ms. Fusaro?
Here.
Mr. Morelli? Mr. Schlosser?
Here.
Mr. Schramm?
Here.
And Ms. Williams. Just a reminder to board members to turn on your microphones when you're speaking so that the public can hear you on the Zoom platform. I'd like to make the public aware, notice of the executive sessions held May 16th, 2024 from 10:40 a.m. to 10:58 a.m. The purpose was to discuss current litigation. May 22nd, 2024, 9:03 a.m. to 9:36 a.m. Purpose also to discuss current litigation. And the last one was May 23rd, 2024, 10 a.m. to 10:38 a.m. Purpose to discuss current litigation. No deliberation took place at any of the three executive sessions. Attorney Molino, I think you wanted to make a remark here.
I do. Thank you, Madam Chair. So just before the board adopts the agenda, I just have a suggestion to make if the board would consider it, and that would be removing item number 2 from the agenda. Mail ballot vendor request for pre-printing of 2024 and November general election mail ballot outer envelopes. One of the reasons is that the Department of State issued a directive last year. Again, it wasn't guidance, it was a directive regarding the new format, the new envelopes. And there were some areas of discretion that counties can make minor changes without seeking any approval. The area of the date was not one of them. But number 2, and most importantly, is the current pending litigation. As everyone on the board knows, and I think everyone here in the public, the Walsh appeal currently pending before the Commonwealth Court deals with this issue, at least partly. And because the board during its adjudication process made a decision, we defended that decision in court. There are now briefs filed of record stating the positions of the various parties with respect to that issue. It's my suggestion that we don't even discuss this tonight in this open meeting, pending the ruling from the Commonwealth Court. And I know you might have good intentions, and it's certainly a topic worthy of discussion, but I'm sometimes afraid of, you might know what you want to say, and maybe it's a very limited nature, but I'm just afraid someone's going to say something they shouldn't, or something's going to be blurted out. And because it's active litigation, I think we should just refrain from discussing anything relative to item number 2.
Okay. I'm certainly okay with that.
I'll make a motion that we remove item number 2 from the agenda.
Seconded.
Seconded by Ms. Fusaro. All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay. Passes unanimously. So would be the adoption of for the amended agenda minus number 2. Is there a motion?
Motion to adopt.
Motion by Ms. Fusaro. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Morelli. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? None heard. The adoption of the amended agenda is passed. Now we'll move into public comment on agenda items. This is an opportunity for members of the public to address the board on matters listed on the agenda. It's limited to 3 minutes and 1 comment time per person. We'll start with those who are in person. And if anybody would like to speak in their in person, just raise your hand. I just want to confirm that the microphone's on with Mr. Ramirez. Yes, okay. So anybody in person would like to speak? Go right ahead. Just state your name and your municipality.
Alan Henninger, Dallas Township. I'm a judge of election in Dallas Township 5. And speaking on agenda item number 4 on the remuneration for the training sessions, in our pay. And I did a little bit of investigation within my own precinct and the adjoining precinct that's in the same room as far as the amount of pay that was on the check that I received. And I thought that it was a motion that I had missed in a board meeting. And I was thanking one of the board members and found out that it had not changed, but my paycheck had changed. And so I think that's part of possibly why number 4 is here, because I ended up getting more than usual for the trainings. Well, I attend up to 5 and 6 trainings of every one of the elections. So I thought, well, that was very nice that instead of the $20, that now it was $40. And I thought, very nice. And I checked with my neighbor, who's one of my poll workers. And sure enough, she had the same $40 on her. So I checked with one of the other poll workers that was in my community. And sure enough, she had $40. And I thought, boy, this is very nice. And then I checked with the judge, brand new judge, in the same room in the other precinct. And he said, no, he said he only received $20. And his wife was new and she only received $20, and he went to multiple sessions. So it was kind of puzzling for me. And I kind of equated it as saying, well, there are some nice people in the world and there's some people that you might not like as well. And I figured maybe I just happen to fit in the category that people like to give me money. I don't know. But in any case, I appreciated the extra money. I really don't think I was supposed to get it, since there was only 3 people that I'm aware of. Now, it could be a widespread thing, and I'm not aware of that either. But I know it's not every single person, because I have done a little bit of checking anyhow. And I just wanted to say I did appreciate it. Okay. And it is in the bank. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Henninger. Is there anybody else in person who would like to speak? Okay, I don't see any hands. We'll go to the Zoom platform. There's one hand raised. Mr. Griffith, go ahead.
Yes, thanks, Madam Chair. I appreciate the opportunity to address the board. First of all, thank you to the board solicitor for pointing out number 2. That was one of the items that I wanted to bring up. And I appreciate his wisdom on advising the board on that. That was what my comment was as well, because it is an ongoing case. The other item that I wanted to talk about was item number 5 regarding the process and procedure for appointment of the chair to the Board of Elections. It's very, very important that this board stay independent as possible. I know there's been a lot of discussion by this board in the past. The vice chair, as well as others on the board, have constantly complained about the interference of the administration with the board. Yet I look at the instructions for the appointment for the chair, and throughout that whole process, it looks like we have interference from the administration. I think the board should be doing the work of appointing the chair. That means the board should be looking at resumes. The board should be looking at the applications. The board should be doing all of that collaboratively, the 4 or 5 of you. And then if you have questions, whether there's a conflict, that's when you could ask your solicitor. But the ability for us to turn the whole process over to the Office of Law and the Board Solicitor, I think, is dangerous for this board to continue with your independence in picking your chair. And that was one of the charter issues that we put when we drafted the charter, was we wanted the board to be able to pick their chair. We didn't want the board to go to the solicitor's office to pick the chair or say who was qualified or who wasn't. We wanted the board to do that because that kept the board independent. So I think it's really, really important when you think about discussing that process for appointment of chairperson, that each board member take in their role that says they're responsible to pick the chair. And when we say the qualifications for applicants or resumes have to go to the solicitor, that gives them the opportunity to screen applicants. And I don't want that to happen. I think the board should be able to see all the applicants in their entirety and pick the chair. If they have questions and there's a conflict, certainly that should be taken out. But the board should see that. The secretary for the board should be notifying the applicants that they've been accepted and come in for interviews. The secretary to the board should be doing all the work for the board, not the Office of Law and not the board solicitor. I think that's very, very important factor when you're picking your chair, because that chair is going to sit there for 4 years and you need to make sure that the board has active roles in picking that person. And the last item that I wanted to just quickly address is number 8. I certainly understand you have a lot of board meetings before the election, and I know some of them are, kind of ministerial in nature, but some of them are pretty intense. So please take that into account. I think this board does a fabulous job of adjudicating the process. You take a lot of time making sure that votes are counted properly, and sometimes it's tedious and sometimes it takes a lot of time. I wouldn't want to see you circumvent that process in the interest of convenience. So please keep that in mind as you discuss those items. Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to talk at the meeting.
Thank you. Is there anybody else online who'd like to speak? I don't see any phone lines and only Zoom participants. I don't see any other hands raised. So we will move into the next part of the agenda is the meeting minutes from. There are 3 different past meetings that we've had. The April 10th, 2024 regular meeting, the April 26th, 2024 special meeting, and the May, that's the adjudication meeting, and the May 16th, 2024 special meeting, that was for the partial certification. I believe they're still in process, Mr. Schramm?
Yes, they are.
Okay, so we'll put those on for the next meeting agenda in July. Agenda items, there was nothing put on.
Can
Oh, go ahead.
I just want to thank Mr. Schramm for all the work he's doing on those, because I know they have to be difficult and it's a lot of work. So I just wanted to say thank you for everything you're doing and it is appreciated.
Under agenda items, the Bureau, there was nothing put on the agenda, so we'll just move into the board. There were several items for the board. Number 1 is the transition from board members inputting write-ins and adjudicated provisional ballots, mail ballots, emergency ballots with overvotes and ambiguous marks to the Election Bureau, facilitating the inputting with the election board oversight of the process. This was put on the agenda by Mr. Morelli for discussion, deliberation, and possible board vote. I'll turn it over to Mr. Morelli.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate putting this on. Let me give a little background. As I joined this board here not too long ago, I came in with an open mind and went through the first election, which, as I said before, the election went great. Everyone should be proud of the board and the office and everything else. And I think it's our goal always to continue to improve, to make things better and so forth. And so, again, some of my suggestions here tonight are nothing to do with saying that what the board is doing is wrong or bad. I think it's just a way to make it more efficient and time better spent with the board. So the first thing, and there's a couple items here, and I talked to Denise about this, and I appreciate her putting this on. The first thing is the fact that, when we came to the point here for the educated provisional ballots and the process there, it was time consuming. And I just, again, don't think that the board should be doing that. And I, even during the process, I sent an email to Romilda saying, can we get help here and have someone? And she supported it. And so, again, I think the point here is that number one, I'm asking for us to put this back in the hands of the Bureau, to let them handle it, number one. And then number two, when we're talking about the I guess the second part here is the marks. What I'm suggesting is that instead of just the board being there all day, just waiting to see if there's a problem or if there's a challenge, let's set times aside during the day for the board to come in, and any questions or any challenges, the board will then meet and look at those ballots at that time. What we did here this time was we'd be sitting there and there'd be a challenge on the screen, and we'd be looking at it, and everyone could come in and, what do you think on this? Put them aside, let the bureau do their job, and then there's a time when the board will meet at that day to go over that and vote accordingly. So I'll stop there. I think that's it with regards to item number 1. So I don't know if you need to vote on it. I don't know if you need to, if it's just a discussion, but.
We'll open it up to discussion from any other input from any of the other board members.
Well, I mean, there have been a lot of questions as to past integrity and things like that. Not saying that anybody did anything nefarious, not saying that there have been any issues here in Luzerne County with regards to adjudication. However, we have strived in the past several years that I've been here to make things extremely transparent to the public, and also accessible. And also I have seen all of us really work hard to strive for integrity and transparency in this process, in the adjudication process. And while it's more convenient for board members to not have to do it ourselves and to let a team of people come in, I fear that if we do that, number one, there's going to that it's not, number one, it's going to move itself away from transparency. Right now we have the screens up, and I know we can have a team come in and do just what we do, and we could stand there and supervise, but we're still supervising. And I'm not going to, I'd rather do it myself. I'd rather people watch what we're doing. And I don't want to move away from that at all. I don't want to move away from having a hands-on approach. I understand what you're saying as far as, we don't necessarily have to be there. I would want to be there every second of the adjudication, watching that happen. And now, I mean, you're talking two different scenarios here. You're talking, we could have, on one hand, we could have a team come in and then we could just supervise them and have them put it all into a file, and then we can review them when the board is together. That's one scenario. And then you have another scenario where you're talking about the board doing all of it unsupervised and then putting it into a file, and us, or supervised by just the general public, but not the board, and then us coming in at another time. I might be open to having the board do it supervised, because I would like to have my eyes on all 5 screens, 4 screens, 3 screens, whatever we have at the time, versus my screen. Okay. And that I would be interested. That might be something I would like to possibly do, as far as being absent and coming in and then doing it at one point. I don't agree with that at all.
So if I may stop. So think about it. You just mentioned the fact that going back and you want to be doing it yourself. You're only on one screen. Now, if you're sitting back, you could watch multiple screens.
Right. And that's what I'm saying, as I might be open. That's what I just said,
and
is that I
I'm not
might
saying
be
here-
open to watching all of the screens instead of watching my own screen, like I just said.
And no, I'm not, my intention is not to take away any of the transparency. You can still have the screens up. You still have the people there. You could still have the board members come in if they want to be there to oversee. I mean, listen, I just feel this is not a job for the board. A board is to watch over, to supervise, not to do day-to-day work. It's as simple as that. And that's why I'm suggesting that. If a board member wants to put their time in, I don't have an issue with it.
And I'm
I
not,
just don't think it's efficient for board members to be there. And again, I think the point is, like I said, I was in the hall and Denise is like, come on, come talk to look over this. And I'm like, if we just put them aside and we all come in, and we go through each of them, it could be 20 of them, could be 50 of them, whatever. And we just go through one at a time. And then you have the whole board knowing that this is the time we're going to be there. And that's all I'm suggesting.
and I understand that, but that's not why you're suggesting it. You're not suggesting it because of that. You're suggesting it because of your own time constraints and the fact that you couldn't make it the whole
It is
time.
a time constraint for board members.
And I
said
understand that, but that sacrifice was
But-
made very clear when you joined
No,
the
no,
Board
no,
of
no, no,
Elections.
no, let's talk
Just
about
saying.
that. Nope, let me explain something. One of the reasons why I put my name in for the board is because they didn't have anybody. Okay, you didn't have anybody. Why didn't you have anybody? You can't find anybody. Why can't you find anybody? Because of the time commitment to it. That's why. So the fact is that what the time commitment is because of the board policies you put in place, not county council's policies, it's the boards. So what I'm trying to say is take the board policies, change them so that you can make it efficient and then you could get more people to run for the board. We're not all going to be on this board for the rest of our lives. There are going to be other people. So it's not fair for people in the county who want to serve and should have to be retired. As I said before, who's going to give up 3 weeks of their time, not get paid in one election? Who? So
Me.
you have to be retired? Well, that's fine, but that's just not, it's not right. It's not fair to others. So it's a policy you're putting in place, shutting out other people. I disagree with it. So I'm trying to make things more efficient. The whole government should be more efficient. This is one of them. And again, it goes back to the point of, this is a debate of how much the board gets involved with the Bureau. I'm a believer that we work with the Bureau. We don't manage the Bureau. We don't tell them what to do. We're overseers. And this is let them do their job and we will oversee. That's my take on it.
This kind of is combining agenda number 1 with agenda number 7, because you're also talking about number 7 is setting aside the questionable overvotes, ambiguous marks for when the full board is present. So I'll address both of them as well, since both of you did. I agree with Mr. Morelli in that I'm open to this transition to the board members, the Bureau maybe leading this and having, that's a question I would have, who's doing it while the board oversees. As long as it would be a transition that would need to be, it would be a process, a transition of oversight. I realize that, but as long as the Bureau would commit to putting together a written procedural outline, because there is none, there is not one. It's all in our heads here. It's all in the board's heads. It's all in Ms. Cook's head. And so we are the only ones that are aware of how this happens. So I think it's time after all these elections to get something formally in writing, so that if there is a transition in the election bureau leadership, there's something in your book for someone to look at and say, oh, this is how it's done. But also for future boards, this board and future boards. But also, just like pre-canvassing, they had the pre-canvassers have like a little, it's like a card that tells them what to do step by step. So I would want to see that for the inputters as well. And also a training for these inputters, just like the pre-canvassing prior to their starting. Now, I've been on the board the longest and I've seen both ways. I've seen where the Bureau led it. When I first came on, the 5 of the board members sat around one screen and we were instructed by the administrative head what we were to do. And at the end of the day, I said, if we have to sit at one screen, this is going to take forever. So the next day we split up to 3 screens. And at the end of that day, I said, do you think we could bring in some help, some county workers or some temporary help? And the next day, 35 people, I think, were in the room to help. And there was a training. I have to say I led that training, which I wasn't really that comfortable with because I had just started. But the person who was leading IT at the time said, I have a doctor's appointment, you have to lead it. And I thought, wow. But anyways, I did it. And we did it as a team. We came together, we trained them all, and it worked. We had 8 screens though. We've only had 4. So then what happened though is it
Can I
changed.
interrupt for just one moment? If you are not actively speaking, please turn off your microphones because that's what's causing the feedback.
So what happened was then, I think they got overtime. And then it changed to, they couldn't get overtime, they got comp time. I don't know what happened, something because we weren't privy to this, but then no one wanted to do it anymore on the county level. So there was like this complete drop of help. And what happened was the board members and the bureau leadership and the admins, this is May 2022 now. I remember Memorial Day weekend, we had to work Saturday and Memorial Day weekend. And that didn't go that well. Anyways, then it got down to, it was just bureau leadership and us. And for whatever reason, we didn't ask, but we did it. And we plugged away, and because we just thought that's what the administration had to give us. And that's the way it's pretty much been. A couple county workers have come in to help us. Now, so I've seen both sides. The inputters that came in were trained, and we just oversaw. There were times that board members did sit in a chair when the chair was empty, and they'd help out just to keep things moving, because the board members are like that. So, but again, I'm okay with the transition. I also agree with Ms. Fusaro in that I wouldn't feel comfortable with not being there. It's just because I've made this commitment and this responsibility to be overseeing. And because there's so much litigation now and so much public scrutiny and so much of a microscope under elections, I would feel very strongly personally that I could not just be home while this was happening as a board member. So I would have to be there. And it's not that would be wanting to micromanage the bureau. It's just how I feel personally about my responsibility as a board member, that somebody could say, well, something got inputted wrong by an inputter, no fault of their own, made a judgment call, chose to discern what the ambiguous mark was for the board, which you can't really do. And it was litigated. These types of things would enter my mind, that I'd want to be there for all of those inputters. Just they had questions, and so I agree with Ms. Fusara on that. The one thing that Mr. Morelli mentioned, and you might have said this in air when you first started, you said you didn't think that the board should be adjudicating provisional ballots, that the bureau should be doing that. But okay, so that was, or maybe I heard that wrong, because we have to do the we have to do the provisional
All
ballot.
I'm saying, and we spoke about this on the phone, was the fact that the bureau should be doing that, and the board should be there watching over. Again, I don't think every board member has to be there all the time. That's all I'm trying to say.
Doing what?
I'm talking, oh, I'm sorry.
Mail ballots or provisional ballots?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. For
or
the
the
adjudication, I
screens.
said, so
The screens.
for the screens, I don't think everyone, I think the board should be there, but I think you should put it in. If somebody wants to be there, be there. But if not, we just need to be there at certain times. But for the day of election, is that what you're talking about?
No, where we adjudicate mail ballots and provisional
think
ballots with
If I can
deficiencies.
clear up, I think I understand where we're at. Mr. Morelli, I think you were talking about the ballots that are on the screen.
Right.
The mail-in ballots that are on the screen, the election day ballots that are on the screen, the mail-in ballots that are on the screen. So it's the write-in, overvote, or undervote ambiguous mark. That, yes.
So you're not talking about election day? You,
That's a
in the
sep- oh, no,
beginning,
that's
That's a separate.
in the
agenda.
beginning,
That's a
yeah,
separate-
but
that's why
in
I
the
was
beginning, he
confused.
said something about provisional ballots.
Right.
And
what I
that's
was
what I'm
wondering.
confused about too.
Seeing them on the screen.
Yeah.
That's what he was referring
Okay.
to, not about like the envelopes or
Right.
things like
Yeah.
that.
Let me see if there's anything else that I had written that I wanted to, before I ask Mr. Schramm or Mr. Schlosser if they want to add anything. I think I said everything that I agreed with it, and I would still want to oversee, but I would only agree if there's a commitment to a written and training. That
There is a commitment. It'll have a written procedure. It really should be part of our standard operating procedures. Obviously,
Is your microphone on? Yeah, okay, all right, yeah.
it should be part of a standard operating procedures, and we will formulate a procedure. We'll distribute it to the board, make your suggestions. We will have staff available. I actually agree with everything that's been said. We need to foster transparency. We will have members of the staff there to do that type of task. It's a lot to ask board members to sit there in front of a screen and input information. We will have individuals there. I also hope that board members will be there. I mean, it may not all of you don't need to be there, but if you want to be there, you can watch what's being input. And
No, not can watch. I think that if we choose to, we can sit down at that computer
You
and
can.
do it ourselves. That's another thing that I would like to do is if I choose to, or if there's a possibility that, that's not being taken away from us at any point.
no,
I also wanted to make sure, and I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry. I also want to make sure that we are not, at no point, it is something that should be micromanaged. I'm sorry, but I'm just saying this from my standpoint.
absolutely micromanaged, but not bullied.
Absolutely. And I agree with that wholeheartedly. And I don't think we've ever bullied anybody during adjudication and during the ambiguous marks and people that have come in to help us during that process.
And you never will.
No, I never will. I'm the one that's usually bullied. And I've found that people from the administration have bullied us quite often recently. But I think that it is imperative that we maintain control of that part of adjudication as well. So if we're giving it up, we're not giving it up fully, okay, and that we are not welcome to be there. It is our duty to be there, and if we choose not to be there, that's our business. But then, at that point, I don't want that given up, especially in election year. I find it disheartening and a little bit scary that we're making this decision on an election year.
So again, I think
There's election every year.
Or presidential. I meant presidential election year.
again, listen, when I brought this up, this is no means to take the board away. We're taking a responsibility, something that I just don't think a board should do. I mean, we're getting to the point where maybe we should go into your office every day and do some things. I mean, we don't go in their office every day, and there's things that go on there in the county that you got to put trust in. You just can't be there overseeing every single thing they do.
And to that
And that's
end,
just not the job of a board, maybe county council.
and to
should-
that end, I've watched judges envelopes for provisional ballots and other things being thrown away in past elections. Actually witnessed it myself, and then got bullied and accused of things that didn't happen just to gloss over the actual thing that happened. So I do have issues and things that I believe that we should be watching and should be witnessing and should have a hand in. And I'm very cautious to pull back from that.
Okay, I think, everybody, I think Mr. Morelli is saying, he's not saying not to do that if you wanted to input. And I don't think go ahead, Ms. Cook.
So, I think there's a lot of mystery about what the potential process could look like. And I feel like that's where a lot of the heated feelings are coming from. And so just to sort of dispel some of the concerns right here and right now, in the policy that we will draft, we would have drafted it already, but didn't want to preempt a board's decision. If the board decides tonight that you would like the Bureau to take the lead on the inputting, the physical data entry inputting, not the process, not the decisions of the process, and not the oversight of the process, just the physical data entry work of that process, which is what the agenda item here is discussing. We'll have that policy drafted for the July meeting. It will be in that policy that this has to be done as part of a public process, as the board's standard has been. The board is, of course, responsible for the oversight of this process. The Bureau at no point has said, we don't want the board involved in this. We don't want the board not to be touching any of this. It is important, of course, for all of you to have an understanding of the process and an awareness of how it's done, because if we don't have an understanding and awareness of what one another is doing, that's where we come into issues.
Well, with that
And-
being said, Mr. Molina or Attorney Molina, would that be appropriate for an MOU?
So
It'll be part of our
Yeah.
standard operating
Yeah,
procedures.
if she's talking about drafting of
drafting a
policies
policy,
already.
if I can just finish my thoughts, this is something that I believe is being discussed at a conference that Mr. Hahn and I are attending this week. So we'll be able to better draft a policy based off of what is the process across the state, and recommendations on how best to do this process. That's something that we would need to work hand in hand with the board in order to say, these are decisions that the board needs to review immediately on site. If you see this, you immediately put it into a quarantine category so that, as Mr. Morelli had said, when all board members are present, that's something that you will all see. And that there's no if and or but, all 5 board members have seen this issue. So if there's 1 or 2 or 3 members of the board present, it doesn't fall just on those 1 or 2 or 3. It is all 5 of you. That's something that we can include in that policy, and what exactly our role would be. I don't want to take anything away from the board's role. These decisions come from you on what we accept and what we reject. And so what is acceptable as a standard practice, we'll go through together once Mr. Hahn and I are able to get a better feel for what the process would look like in an ideal scenario for Luzerne County, based off of how we have done it in the past, how other counties are doing it. You know, there are ways to tailor what we have done to make that process a little bit better and a little bit less
Burdensome.
difficult, stressful,
Stressful.
to make it a little bit easier on the board and on the administration, so that we walk into it ahead of Election Day. As I said, we'll have this prior to the July meeting. Drafting standard operating procedures is something I can do in my sleep at this point, and I'm sure my fiance will agree that I do it in my sleep. So we'll have that ready for you prior to July, and that gives us plenty of time for the board to review, provide your feedback, say, this is something we would be more comfortable if you make this the procedure instead. This is something that if the board decides tonight, you would like to make that transition to the Bureau leading the data entry, we'll draft that operating procedure and present it to the board in the July meeting.
And then we'll have training, which you'll be a part of.
Correct. And
Well-
the workers that would be doing that would be the sworn-in workers that we hire for pre-canvassing.
And may I suggest, maybe I can make a suggestion here. Would it be, I think I need to wrap my head around it. I think I need to gain more comfort with it, and I need to get, I need to, because it isn't a presidential election year, and I think I want to feel, I want to get the public's, I want to get some of the public, I want to get their feel on it as well. So let me ask you if this wouldn't be too much work, since you said you can do it in your sleep. Would this be something that we could draft and then come back to? Would it be too much work to draft it? And I don't want to put you on and then we vote it down. I don't want to do that to you, but at the same time, it would make me feel a whole lot more comfortable if we tabled this pending a review of standard operating procedure and a review and I guess I should ask Romilda, if that's okay as well, that we go with a draft of this, and then once everybody feels more comfortable with it, then we can vote on it. Does that make sense? And
Well, I believe
well,
that's what
I-
Emily was suggesting. They're
Uh-huh.
going to this conference.
Right.
Uh,
well, yeah, but this
so
is on for a vote right now.
Well,
and that's why
well,
I'm-
procedurally, you have to,
Yeah.
you know,
It
I-
listed as a possible board vote, so you don't actually,
Right,
you're
you
not
don't have
required
to,
to
right.
vote on it now.
I do want to add a couple things, but I do want to hear from Mr. Schlosser and
Yeah,
Mr.
and I'm
Schramm
sorry about
before
that.
we discuss tabling this, because I want to say that I really don't think, I've seen both sides. I've seen it done 3 different ways, I've told you, and I think the best way is that the board should not be inputting these. I agree with Mr. Morelli. The board oversight, yes, that's the role of the board. And to address the adjudication of ambiguous marks or the overvotes, it needs a board decision. But I think going forward, and I think it's time to move this back. There was a lot of turnover. We all know that, a lot of change up in the election bureau. And that was a big part of why I think the board was being more involved than it really should be with this inputting. And I think, again, it goes back to just the board stepped up, and I'm not blaming them. I'm saying they knew, they recognized a need and they addressed it. But I think that the bureau is on good ground right now, and I think it's time now to transition back to the way it really should be. And I agree, and I know, I'm sure it's done this way in other counties. And it's not that we're not going to be there. You can be there the whole time and oversee, and you'll be able to see more than just what's on your screen. And I think there's a definitely a positive to that, because as a board member, you can see, the big picture rather than just one ballot that's presenting. And also, it's not saying that you can't sit in and do it if you'd like. Any board member could. I personally would prefer not to. I'd rather be there to address questions. And I also like that because this came up, there was an issue with this election, because there was such a close race. We really made the decision that anything to do with that race, and that might come up again in future elections where there could be a close race. And I think we made the right decision that instead of that we would vote on those, where we usually do informal bipartisan team votes. We always made that we had to do it with a bipartisan team. Informally, yes, no, yeah, that's ambiguous, no. But with that race, we decided we were going to always vote with a quorum. We voted on whether a quorum or a full board, and it was voted a quorum. And I'm okay with all that, making votes like that going forward for anything where there's an issue. But I am in favor of maybe setting a time each day or every other day where the board sits down with all those that were quarantined at one screen together, whatever, and go through them at a set time. And whoever's there is there, as long as there's a quorum. That's who does it. To say, well, so-and-so couldn't be here. Well, we're not going to put it off. This was the time that was set. We're doing it. So each day you do it and whatever, so that it's efficient and it doesn't get held up by saying, well, maybe tomorrow, because sometimes people get sick. If there's somebody sick, you're not going to have everyone on the board. So to limit it to everyone, I say a quorum. That's the one thing I would say. But I've spoken enough, and I'd like to hear from Mr. Schlosser and Mr. Schramm, their input on this, their thoughts on it.
I actually feel that I shouldn't be inputting data. I'm good at it.
You're hired.
But no, I put those years in. I spent 3.5 years at Social Security, which was a living nightmare. But anyway, I think I feel personally that I should be watching to see what's being done, because you can watch what's being done far easier than you can when you're trying to just do it yourself, because you can't see what's going on around you. It's like when we're watching them open the mail and do the ballots. When you're walking around the room, you see a lot more. You can observe a lot more. When you have people that are putting things in on the screen, you can watch how they're putting it into the screen. You can catch something that's gone wrong and stop it. But when you're sitting here, nobody can see what I'm doing, and they're hoping that I'm going to get them on the moon's flight, but there's no guarantee. But that was, I'd be very open to having more people come in trained, doing it. And like I said, quarantine, if there's a question that needs to be resolved, push it aside, and then we can do it at a fixed time when we want to do it. And I don't think I would wake one of these things up at 4:30 in the afternoon. We got to be there to do this. I think we just, I'd rather come in at 9 in the morning the next day to do previous days rather than save it just for a fixed time. If you only have 3 to do, why should I come in for 3? We'll wait another day. Maybe they'll wait until you get it 25 or 30, to go with it. And I don't want to wait to the end. I don't want to come in there and say, well, you only have an hour to do this done, and everybody's got to drive in, find a place to park. It just doesn't work. But I'm for having somebody else do it, and then me just watching what they're doing. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Schramm. Mr. Schlosser?
Yes, this was my first election, and a lot of it's new to me. I didn't realize there was so much work and so much involved. It does take time, but during the interview, the council asked me if I had the time, and I said I did. And if I feel I don't have the time, I'll just bail out. But it's been a great experience. From what I observed, I think the Bureau does a very good job, and the board. I don't think the public realizes how much is involved, and it's so important to protect our election process and our democracy. And it's just important to be fair to everybody and give everyone a fair shake, regardless of their party. But yeah, I would agree with Dan and everyone else that we should look at that. And I'm not like Bill Gates, and I have a difficult time with data entry. So yeah, I'd like to look at whatever Emily has to propose and see if we can make some changes. But in the end, it's just to make the system better for everybody. That's about it.
I'd just like to add that when you're transitioning something, with anything, there will probably be tweaking along the way. We may come along with things and say, hey, you know what, that isn't working that well. We're going to tweak it. So it might not be perfect for this election coming forward, but we'd all be there overseeing and supervising anyway. And you can adjust things and say for the next, we're going to change the wording on this outline because we've already recognized this or that. But so I would anticipate needing some tweaking, even whatever gets put together, because that's just the way every document I've ever seen on elections ends up being in what we're doing, the adjudication. I mean, we've tweaked that adjudication agenda every election since I've been on, and to fine tune it to get it even better and make sure we're addressing in everything, all the checks and balances. So I think it could be, to start this process of transitioning for this election. I think it's a great idea.
And I think part of my hesitation, I want to make it very clear, I think actually a good portion of my hesitation is the fact, not only because it is a presidential year, but also it is because of, something else that we do have on the ballot that we're going to be discussing as well. It seems that when we hand over a tiny portion of we give a portion of control from the board standpoint, it seems like the Bureau, we can never, as a Bureau and a board, since I have been here, I don't feel that we have actually worked the way we're supposed to work. And it has always been a push-pull in one way or another. It's always been almost, oh, you can't do that. No, that's our responsibility. No, that's your role. That's your role. And it has been this constant fight. And so I guess part of my hesitation is giving up control of this and then finding out it's being done wrong or taken full control. And in the future, not so much that it'll be done this election, but that in the future that it will be done. And then next thing you know, it'll be like, oh, well, there was precedence and there was this and there was that. And next thing you know, it's like, so that's part of my hesitation with doing this is not so much, it's just that we do not have a working well or partnership with the Bureau. And I'd like to see that happen, but it seems like it hasn't happened yet. And so maybe this will be the beginning of that, but I'm hoping that that does take place. I mean, one-on-one, we're awesome. You know what I mean? We're but when it comes down to brass tacks and all of this stuff, I want to see it work. It's just that it's been a challenge. It has been a challenge. I mean, and there are things that I'm going to ask to be put on, especially next agenda, that, I want to see us work together well with the Bureau office. And I want to start seeing things happen that way. I'm just hesitant at that, because of past things that have happened. So, and I'm not blaming you for that. I'm just looking at you because you're Bureau, but I'm not blaming you for that. So I think that's it.
And we're already 1 hour
I
into
know,
one
you're right.
question. Could we move on and so we could get out of here at a decent time and just not to, I think we spoke enough, either make move on or not.
If we want to wrap up this agenda item, I'll draft a standard operating procedure following the conference that Mr. Hahn and I are attending this week. And we'll send it out for the June. Nope, we're in June, July meeting. We'll have it set up for the board to review and then potentially vote on at that point.
I appreciate it.
Okay, so we'll add that. I'll add that to the next agenda then, and we won't vote on it tonight. Okay. Okay, the next item is item number 3. And since we skipped number 2, and that's the process for handling handicap voters when they go to vote. Mr. Morelli asked for this to be put on the agenda for discussion. I'll turn it over. to
Yeah,
Mr.
and we'll
Morelli.
keep it quick. Again, when I went out on the day of election, I went to a voting precinct and someone brought it to my attention. They said, can you look into the process of how we handle individuals who come in or are handicapped? And their point was they made it seem as if when they have to do this process and they're almost separated and they're kind of putting them in a position that may be uncomfortable. And they asked me to bring it to the board just to look into it. I don't know exactly what our process is. And they said, and there may be nothing we could do about it. I just promised that I would look into it, bring it up. And if there's a way to make things easier for anyone who's handicapped and not to put them in a center of attention, I think that would be great. So that's all. Obviously, for them to bring it up, that what they felt there was a concern.
Well, they might be, can I ask, I don't want to obviously not personal names or anything, but how, what was their handicap?
I don't know. I didn't ask. It was just a
Okay.
general.
Well, it makes a difference as to whether it's handicap using the ramp and coming in a separate entrance or
No,
whether
it's about filling out the form. It's about filling out, getting in there, and you have to fill out a form. And I guess the fact is the way it was. I understand that they come in and they need help. They're handicapped and they have to be put aside, and they got to do all this paperwork. And it's kind of like maybe eyes on them and creating this process. And if we could make a way that it's simpler and more.
why
better
would they
for-
have to fill out a form?
So I believe what you're referring to is the declaration for the need of assistance,
Yeah.
which needs to be filled out if the voter requires the poll worker to assist them with actually voting. So that would be saying, I cannot do something with the voting process on my own, and would need someone to assist me. It's authorizing someone to assist them.
Can we make that part of the training? Because maybe that poll worker is making a mistake and that person doesn't really need help with that. They just need to use the machine.
So we only use all of the polling places use the machines.
No, I'm talking the handicap machine. Maybe they just
Right.
want to use the handicap machine and somebody is.
So I think the resolution best would be I'll discuss with our poll worker coordinator to sort of update our training procedures to include a little bit more of an awareness and a sensitivity to the needs of any voter, because I know we've had concerns brought to us from voters who had to vote a provisional ballot that made them feel they had done something wrong or they were uncomfortable with that. So working on a sensitivity to being respectful of, somebody has something that is setting them to a different portion of the process, and making it a little more of a smooth process for all of the voters in the county, not just for any particular group, but in a general sense. If there's something that needs to be filled out, a form or something, or a provisional ballot, something that is not within the realm of the normal check-in process, to sort of create a better process to that training. And we'll send you the updated training module once we add that in.
Mr. Morelli, do you know the polling site?
It was down at Sugarloaf. That was brought up.
Sugarloaf?
Yeah,
Okay, maybe
so-
it's a setup issue too.
Again, it's just one of those things that someone asked, and I think
Mhm.
that- look into it. That's all.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Item number 4, Bureau of Elections Adjustment of Poll Worker Training Pay for the 2024 primary election. I asked for this to be put on the agenda for discussion, just discussion only. And I want to just start by saying I personally, as regarding paying more for poll workers, I actually have no problem with that. And for poll workers to attend both an e-poll book and a poll worker training to be paid $20 for each, I would be happy to just put that on the agenda, discuss it with the other board members, deliberate on it and vote on that. And personally, I would be all for it. That's not why this is on the agenda. This is purely on the agenda for the process of how this is done. That it is the board's role to decide the poll worker training pay. We've done it consistently since 2021. And so that it was done surprised me, that had happened without the board being even aware of it. And so that's all. That if going forward, that's how it would be done. And then I certainly would be happy if the Bureau, if what you're getting at is that you want to pay for an e-poll book and a poll worker training and offer that, I think it's good to promote that to get maybe more people to come. So it's good to talk about this, but to let people know in advance so that those that might have gone for the $20 extra could have gone, but also to make sure those that do go to 2 are definitely getting paid for going to 2. And then if the other board members would like, or in discussion, to put it on the next agenda to vote on that change, I certainly will put it on the agenda. So that's all I have. If anybody else would like to add anything.
Yeah, and I think part of my, this was part of what I was talking about was, we are always talking about roles and staying in our lanes and all of that stuff. And trust me, I have to say that for especially Mr. Henninger, because I love seeing him at all of our meetings. He is a joy, and we appreciate you. I want you to know that, and we appreciate all the poll workers. I know, Joe, you've been a poll worker in the past, and several others have been poll workers that are here, and they are extremely valuable. And we should be training them or paying them for each training they're going through. But this is another thing of, well, who overstepped and where did it come from and why? Because we've always approved it. Never would have had a problem approving it at all. I know I wouldn't anyway. I would totally vote for this, like 110%. My issue is that it wasn't put in front of us to vote on, and it wasn't requested. It was just kind of there. And so that's all I have to say on the subject.
Well, the administration recommends that they be paid, that the poll workers be paid for every training that they attend. I also will have Budget and Finance look at the process of the timeliness of the payment to the poll workers. We're going to streamline that as well. We can look in, just look back to see why the decision was made. I think it was because the board mandated training, and the process was getting the information from the people that were attended the training, and they were just put into a system. We'll be working, Budget and Finance will be working with the board. We'll streamline that, but it is a recommendation of the administration that the poll workers and the judges that attend trainings get paid. The $20 that we pay to train people to be the boots on the ground for our democracy, I think it's well worth it.
And it's minuscule. It is. They deserve a lot more. So, but.
All right, we'll move on to the next item. Number 5 is the proposed amendment of the Board of Elections and Registration by a proposed amendment for the Board of Election bylaws. And the amendment proposal is process procedure for appointment of chair to the Board of Elections and Registration. I included and it should be attached to your agenda, just an initial proposal that is certainly a start. And I know there was public comment on that in the beginning with some very, very good points. But this is a start, I thought, for maybe if we want to choose to add an amendment, and it's something that certainly, if there's wanting changes, I mean, I'm certainly, I think it would be allowable to have everybody, if they haven't had feel like a long enough opportunity to take it home and make notes and come back with changes to it, we could always do it at the next meeting. And if we want to go forward with it, if there's a strong feeling of no, don't want this, for whatever reason, I'll allow that. I'll open up for discussion in just a second. The reason that I put it on the agenda is because there is nothing in the bylaw. We have new bylaws. We've only just, they were only just created. Ms. Cerniak put them together at the very end, towards the end of the year. She worked on it with Mr. Schramm. They were the committee. And it's had one amendment so far. And so it's new. There are bound to be things that as we go along that we feel like that should be in the bylaws. And this is one thing I felt strongly about, because the county council has a process for when they do their ABC's interviews. It's in their bylaws. And then how they bring it to their meetings, and how then they nominate, they vote, and how they vote. And so they have a defined process of how they appoint the 4 members of the board. And then the charter just states that the members of the board appoint their own chair, and that's really it. Now, all I have to go back on is my experience of being appointed to the board. And I did look back at some of the earlier minutes, as from 2012, to see how they processed it. I didn't get much out of those. So all I remember was my process and how it was done. So I kind of took from that and kind of put this together. My thinking was, I know that for the county council, I believe the Office of Law does do kind of the vetting of the discerning of, and the looking into of, are they qualified per the charter? There are charter requirements for any board members, and for the chair, there's like a separate one. But I mean, the public comment was maybe the board members should do that. And I'm not saying the board members shouldn't get all copies of all of the applications to review. I do think they should get that, but I think that I think the Office of Law is personally the entity to do the vetting, which I know they've done in the past for all ABCs too, I think. So it's appropriate. But I'm thinking also, in a way, when you're discerning a chair, to not how to stay as nonpartisan as possible, in that you're not allowing any one board member, whether they're a Dem or Republican, to really manage that, because then somebody could say, oh, yeah, that board member was doing all that and we don't even know what they were doing. They were making phone calls and telling people that. And so I kind of removed it into the Office of Law to do that process in a way to make it on the up and up, I guess, to be transparent. And so I don't think that in saying that every application would have to come to the board, the board members could, maybe the secretary could be assigned to pick them up, but then deliver them to the Office of Law to then say, yeah, I delivered 7, there weren't 6. There could be a way to discern that. But anyways, this was my proposal. Because there isn't anything, I think it's important to have something for this board, future boards, to at least have a template on how this process is done. And I think it's time to have something there. I think it should be there in the bylaws on a process, since the county council has a process.
And I agree with you. I think that I agree with you on one and disagree on the other. I agree that the Office of Law should review all the applicants. However, I feel that they should come to the board at the same time that they go to the Office of Law, or each time the Office of Law gets an applicant, it comes before the board. It gets sent to the board within a timely manner, within a few hours or days if it's over a weekend. However, and I believe that the Office of Law should review all, be it for conflicts, especially with conflicts of interest and things of that nature. I think that's imperative that we have your oversight on that. However, with regard to contacting the applicant and notifying of the meeting date, time, place, and attendance, I believe that should be the clerk to the board that should do that.
Okay.
That's my only thought process on that. However, if there is a conflict, that should not be that shouldn't go through the clerk. That should go through the Office of Law. I think that's should stay the same. So just the first line should be the clerk, but the board solicitor should contact the applicants that have conflicts. That's just my input. My thoughts on that, just because of privacy. I think issues, if there is a conflict, like if I had a conflict and I was applying to a board, I would want the solicitor to notify me, not a clerk. Just, but at the same time, I think the clerk should notify of meeting dates and times and stuff like that. So, but other than that, I see this as, I see this as really good. I just would like to see that all of us, get the applicants at the same time as the Office of Law, if that's,
Madam Chair, if
doable.
I could jump in, and
Sure.
Ms. Fasaro, I completely agree with your last suggestion. I think that's appropriate, what you said about the last paragraph on page 3. At least the first part of it should be the job of a clerk, but then if there's a conflict, it could be the solicitor. And as long as we're talking about this process and the Office of Law's role, I generally agree with what Controller Griffith said. In general terms, I understand the concern that he raised, but I don't think anything in this outline, minus Ms. Fasaro's suggestion, violates that or adds to the concern of Controller Griffith. And clearly, this process just simply says the Office of Law should review for legalities, one of them being conflicts with the charter, but that's it. And even if there are, all of those are sent directly to the board. We don't get to make a determination about, who is appropriate or not. That is still ultimately the board's decision. And these kind of tasks are something that, whether it's a solicitor's office or a government, or if it's a private entity, let's say it's a major corporation, they're going to have their counsel, their in-house counsel, do something very similar to what's on pages 3 and 4. This is standard practice. One of the most important parts in here is on page 4, your second paragraph, the interview questions predetermined by the board and reviewed by the Office of Law. Again, I don't want to make up any questions for you, but let's just say, and I'm going to throw out some examples. Someone has a question here. Let's say you're interviewing a young female and someone wants to ask, well, you know, boy, there's a lot of time constraints for this board position. Do you plan on having any children in the next 4 years? I'm going to stop you immediately and say, are you crazy? You cannot ask that. That must be removed. So those are the kind of things why you need
Yeah.
the solicitor's office to review something like that. So again, I totally understand, appreciate the controller's concerns. Generally speaking, he's correct, but I think what's outlined here is appropriate. You're not asking us to do anything, usurping your authority. It's just to review for legalities, for conflicts, God forbid any, inappropriate questions that might violate God knows how many different types of laws. So.
And I
That's all.
think your review for consistency on the questions would be imperative too. I do. And I do want to also, I want to thank you, Denise, for putting this together because it's very comprehensive. I mean, but yeah, I just appreciate it. Thank you.
Any other input on this from any other board members? Mr. Schlosser, Mr. Sher. Now, I guess, I agree with changing that solicitor to board clerk. I forgot all about the board clerk. Isn't that terrible? But but the board clerk, yeah, that's great. So do you think that instead of tabling this does anybody here on the board feel they need more time to look at this, want to address it, adjust it before any kind of motion to?
I'll make a motion to approve it. And then if we need to make any changes or somebody wants to make a
You can
change
amend
to
it
it,
later.
we can amend it later. But with the change, with the change of clerk being instead of the solicitor on the first line, other than that, I'd like to make a motion to approve it with that change.
I'll second.
And Ms. Fasaro, why don't you also add the change that, I think it was your suggestion too, that the applications automatically from the beginning, in the first instance,
Yeah.
go to the board as well. So even though the Office of Law might be reviewing them for determinations of conflicts with the charter or any other law for that matter, you still have them in your possession.
Right.
It's not that we're seeing something first before you.
Get forwarded.
How about both the Board of Elections and Registration and the Luzerne County Office of Law both receive all applications. And then the second line there would be the Office of Law reviews all applicants for the determination of any conflicts.
I agree with that.
Okay, all right. So it'd be
Is
both
everybody else okay with that?
the
Those
Board of
changes?
Elections and Registration and the Luzerne County Office of Law, that second paragraph. Well, I'll start with the Board of Election and Registration and the Luzerne County Office of Law, both receive all applications, period. The Office of Law reviews all applicants for determination of any conflicts, et cetera. So that'll be a change, and then change the bottom solicitor, the first one,
First
to board
sentence
clerk.
to clerk.
Yeah, board clerk.
So I make a motion to approve this
With those two changes.
document with those two changes.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Morelli. We'll have a roll call vote. Mr. Schlosser?
Yes.
Mr. Schramm?
Yes.
Ms. Fasaro?
Yes.
And Mr. Morelli?
Yes.
Ms. Williams, yes. The motion passes unanimously to accept that proposed amendment for the bylaws on the appointment of the chair with those amendments. We will now move into there's a question and answer. Do we need public comment if the motion is amended? I
So
mean, I've noted
We can call
many
for a public.
amendments
I don't think. we can.
to amendments to what's been on our, this was a publicly,
That's right. Yeah, like you did not already have a set motion with
right, no.
specific details or
Right.
language in there. I mean,
Okay.
it made it clear you have your proposals. It's up for discussion, deliberation, and possible board vote. So no, you're okay.
All right. Okay, so the next item is 6, election day pre-canvassing schedule for board members to be present. This was put on the agenda by Mr. Morelli up for discussion, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Morelli.
Yeah, again, this is just something else that I mentioned that I noticed throughout the process. And, all I'm saying in this is, we went there and had all the board the day of election. The bureau was there, the people were trained. I mean, it was great. All I'm saying is that, I look at the board as like, we have 5 of us and we all should maximize our time to do what we can and not just be there just to be there. And so when I'm not saying board shouldn't be there, but I said, like earlier, I left to go someplace and I stopped at one voting place and just asked how are things going, and I got feedback. And personally, I'd like to go out on election day to as many polling places as I can to ask questions. And I think that this goes back to, I think the Bureau does a great job. I think they're there handling that. I think they're there working with the people who are assisting. And I think if the board wants to be there during that time, I think board members should be. But I think also be a good idea for board members to get out, go to polls. And like we said before, we don't have to have, and if there's a time where there has to be something voted, put some times out there to say the board is going to be meeting at a certain time to be there. Again, it's just trying to maximize time to go do other things. I mean, there were times we just sat there and it was like, someone's raising their hand. Let me jump to go grab a pile of papers and bring them over. That's something that they could do.
No, that's not.
That's
That's not what's happening on election day. And unfortunately, you were behind the thing, so you didn't really see what was going on. We were actually
I was
voting.
able to oversee everything.
I know,
like that.
but we were voting. When they raised their hands, that meant that they were calling us over to vote on whether those ballots should move forward or be segregated to go to adjudication. That's what that's for. Now, we've always been kind of lax election day, on morning election day, because election day morning, I have, and Denise knows this, I always stop at a minimum, which I didn't this time because I was really sick. But I always stop at a minimum of 4 polling places before I come in.
So how could you stop if we start at 7? How could you start at 4? How would you go to 4?
I'm never there at 7. We've always been lax in coming. Denise always goes there directly at 7. She's there for the opening. And there are other board members that are always there for the opening. I choose to stop at Sawyersville, Luzerne, 2 polling places in Kingston, and sometimes I'll fit in one of the other ones on the back road there.
So I get.
So no, my hope.
There's no issue there. Then what you're saying is what I'm suggesting.
Mhm.
We don't have to be there. You don't have to be there at 7. We need to make sure we have certain people there throughout the day. And if the board wants to go out, maximize their time, go to other polling places during the day, that's what recommended. That's all. It's very simple. I don't want to, this should not.
It's not that simple, because as the day goes later on, we have other duties. We have to do the cure list. We have voting. There needs to be a Republican in the room at all times, since we are the minority, in order to vote on ballots. Otherwise, they
Is that a
are.
law? Was it just a rule that we made up?
You want to handle that?
I'm just curious.
Yes,
I mean, I know I just look at us as a board. We're all supposed to be unbiased, right? Well, why do we have to have a Republican and Democrat? Or is that just the way it should be? Well, I'm just asking. I mean,
because if there is a signature on the envelope, and I'm picking an
Basically saying
easy
that-
one, okay, that would definitely both would agree on, okay. But however, if there is something like that on a ballot, on the back of a ballot. And Denise agrees that that's a signature, and I agree that that's not a signature because
Can we
it's not
put
on the
these things
signature
aside?
line. We need to vote on that.
Once again,
Can-
put them
let
on
me
the side.
finish,
Put 'em aside.
please.
I know, but we're
Let
getting
me
long. We
finish.
gotta
I
cut
know
the
you
chase here.
can't wait
I
to
know,
get
this-
out of here
we're not
because
here. It's
it
just a long
annoys you
time.
to be part of the election
Here,
board,
talk,
but let
talk,
me
talk.
finish, please.
Okay, let's just get moving on in here. All right, all I'm saying is move it to the side, let the board come in, vote on it at a time. Don't have to be there all the time. You want to be there, hands on, God bless, do it. Other members, go out to the polls, come in, set a time. Here are things there's questions on, the board votes on it.
We're
And as Denise
talking
mentioned
about
before,
your
you don't have to have
job
all
on
5 people.
election day. You can't even be present for the full day on
Go out
election
to the
day?
polls.
For
You
Pete's
just
sake,
said you went to the
man.
polls.
Okay,
You
so,
just said it.
okay, well,
Hello?
let some of the other board members give some input.
morning.
Okay, well, what's the difference in the morning than in the afternoon? Put time aside. to
Because
vote
we
on it.
have other duties
Put time aside
throughout
to
the
vote on it.
day.
Okay.
Who's to say that those things that can't come up in the morning either?
Okay, if I could just maybe shed a little light on it, might help with this. Since I've been on the board, I always send out an email to everyone. I ask you is there any time during the day that you can't be there? And it's just so that I can make sure that we have people for the cure list and we can make adjustments. I can make adjustments. If everybody can't be there at a certain time, we can move things back or have the chairs pick up their cure list at another time. So I'm just saying, I'll shoot out an email. If you can't be there at certain times, you can't be. But I want to go back. I look back and I remember this coming up more than once. And then I've heard other things being said that it's not necessary to have a quorum there. But in the October 28, 2020 Board of Election meeting minutes, so I'm reading what it says exactly in the minutes. Solicitor Butera then speaks to pre-canvassing and that there will need to be at least 3 board members present at the start at 7 a.m. on election day and throughout the rest of the day in order to have a quorum if any vote is needed and if any questions arise from the workers. I do remember Ms. Cerniak telling me that was when I came onto the board, that in 2020 for the presidential election, that was the sentiment for the board because there were issues in litigation and things coming up like in real time at that time, to be there, to be present, because the board might have to have an executive session. The board might have to vote on something. Things come up on election day, like November of 2022, where the board should go into an executive session and discuss that, and then maybe vote on things. So these things can come up during the day. Now, if somebody's not there, they certainly could be called and told, but as long as there's a quorum, there can be a vote. So I send out the schedule so that I have an awareness of kind of where everybody's at for the day, schedule the curing list. If somebody wants to be there all day, hey, they can be too. And the other thing is this, I know Ms. Fasaro brought up about the voting. We kind of made that a board decision that we would always do a bipartisan team of that. There were always Republicans and always Democrats in any decision, a vote in pre-canvassing during the write-in adjudication. And we did that for the public, really. And we did that for board members because some board members preferred that. And so we kind of made that our own informal process that we felt more comfortable doing that. And we felt that that was a good thing for the public. And I agree with that. I really do. I'd rather not make a decision all Dems or all Republicans. I just think that the public would prefer that as well. So that really was an informal decision by the board. There are many times that board members are not present in the pre-canvassing room. Often 2 or 3 of us are making curing lists for an hour or 2, and there might only be 1 or 2 up there. And if there are as long as there's a bipartisan team, I was always comfortable with them addressing pre-canvassing questions and I know, and I trusted them that we had done it enough that if we weren't sure and we thought we need more board members to decide this, just send it to adjudication. We kind of had this just send it, we'll discuss it later. But the merit to addressing some of these as it's happening is it limits so much going to adjudication. It cuts down on the back end. So if we can say all seal issues, if the inner envelope isn't sealed, maybe it came apart, we'll talk about it, maybe it came apart in the mail, they're all going to go forward.
We've pretty much eliminated seal
Yeah,
issues from
There
the,
used to be a lot more
there
going to
used to be a lot of
adjudication,
them.
but now we just say they go forward, we decided it, we got together. So there's merit to being there
So
and
Denise,
having a quorum.
Again,
We're a
to
bipartisan
simplify
team.
this, why don't we just agree the fact that during the day, you have a schedule, you're gonna have 3 people there, no matter what, that if something comes up. On top of that, we will have set times that the board will be coming together for other things. That's all
Yeah,
I'm saying.
I
And
agree.
I think that's all I'm suggesting on this.
I
okay?
agree. I agree completely with that. And
That's all.
then if there isn't a quorum, if something comes up and there has to be a vote, say it's just me and Ms. Fusaro, we have to track somebody down, tell you to come in and who can get there first. And you know what? The board's always been really good about coming in really quick.
That's all.
If I could just make one recommendation from what the Bureau has observed over the last, in my experience over the last several years and Mr. Hahn's experience over the last few elections, it might be a more efficient part of the process if rather than having our workers raise their hand for every ballot they have a question on, if it is not within the scope of this is the norm, this is a normal signature, a normal date, normal this, and this, anything out of the realm of this is an exactly normal, perfectly acceptable ballot, we're going to have them in November immediately just pull it to the side for the board to review while you're doing your cure list throughout the day. And that way.
and
we're-
we've come
we're-
across those where we've come across them where where you have pulled it and put it in the cure list while we're doing the cure list. And we're like, yeah, there's nothing wrong with this ballot.
Right, exactly.
know?
And those go back upstairs to be counted at that time.
Right.
But what that will save us in terms of time, we're anticipating a rather significant amount of ballots to be returned for this upcoming election. And so sort of maximizing the time that we have our workers spending. If there's something that's going to require some kind of discussion, it would be the Bureau's recommendation to have that discussion. Anything relating to having a discussion should be separated immediately. The board can review that. And that way we keep that process moving along. The board,
So you're saying send everything to adjudication.
no, what I'm saying is when you're reviewing those batches of ballots that would have been pulled during pre-canvassing, it is precedent that there are ballots that come through in that time while you're doing your curing lists that are acceptable, that would not have needed to have
She's
been.
saying only at the end of the day when we don't have any more cure lists that we do that.
No,
Oh,
I'm
no.
saying that you do that throughout the day.
But when we're doing the cure list, not to do it? That
No.
everything just goes to
Mm,
adjudication?
No, I am not saying to send everything to adjudication by any means. We'll be in adjudication for 2 months. What I'm saying is to, instead of where if I have a question every 5 minutes, I'm stopping my batch every 5 minutes. One of the things that we have noticed.
But you
is-
notice it doesn't happen like that. It's
Right.
it's fairly quick, and we come over, we're like, yeah, no, that's good to go through. Or no, it's not good to
Sometimes.
go through.
Sometimes.
And then there are some that require a little bit more investigation.
And if
There's
that
over-
happens, then we do put it aside. We
And-
always say
But it's stopping
we're
the
at a
process of them
standstill,
doing their
let's do
jobs.
adjudication.
That's what we have to
Except
be
what I'm
careful.
saying is anything that they would have needed that's out of the realm of this is an exactly normal ballot. This is exactly what I'm expecting to see here. We would be spending our time a little bit more efficient if when something questionable comes about, rather than stopping any batch at any time in its entirety. Because if one ballot in a batch of 100 has some kind of issue, even if it's a 2-minute discussion, that's something that's 2 minutes where 99 ballots are sitting, waiting for that decision. Where if one ballot out of those 99 could be sent to the board to review on election day during pre-canvassing, not sent to adjudication. But those decisions where the seal issues, we had that election with the envelope glue wasn't working, so there were a lot of tape. And the board reviewed those and decided during the day, these are acceptable in this scenario. We'll add that to, we had that whiteboard for this election. So decisions that the board is making throughout the day that you're identifying, this is a standard, we're seeing this, we're going to make this decision here. We'll include those on that board. We're not asking you to push them to adjudication or to stop reviewing them. What we're asking and what we're recommending is that as part of the process, we, our workers, the temporary employees or the staff that we have, do not stop their other 99 ballots. That one goes to be reviewed by the board on election day and decided on election day.
All right. Okay.
And that way we
I'm-
keep,
I'm sure as we do it
Well-
that day, you can explain and.
and we'll outline that as well. We're working on a couple of pretty major documents for the board to review over the summer, as I had kind of alluded to back when we were
All
actively
right,
in the
well,
midst of the election.
we're not making
so.
any changes right now at this moment, so.
Yeah, and I can appreciate it because just like the adjudication, agenda, I tweak that. I keep tweaking that. And I think that it's only right that I think it's good with pre-canvassing to keep looking back at things, evaluating it and saying, how can we do it better? And I think that's what you're saying is how can we do this better? You've recognized some things. Let's go for it. Yeah. Any other board members? And the next, I think number 7, we can skip
Same
because
thing.
we
Yeah,
really
we
didn't
can
talk
skip
about
it.
that. Yeah.
Process. So that's, yep.
Yeah. Number 8, decreasing number of election board meetings prior to election day. Mr. Morelli put this on the agenda for discussion.
Yep, and again, it's just a discussion. It's about going back to what we said before. We want to be efficient. Just think, I know things come up, and I'm not saying don't have a board meeting if something's important. I'm not saying that. Let's just try to do our best of being prepared, getting up to the election with what we have to discuss, what we need to do. I just feel that I want, when it gets closer to the election, and I've seen the Bureau, they're busy. They're really busy. And I want to really have them focus their time on doing what's right for the elections. And, so let's just think, rather than just having meetings and put one thing on, let's just be smart. Let's try to put as many things as we can on beforehand and then limit it. That's all.
Well, we actually added work sessions, and it doesn't mean that we are actually going to use all of the meetings, but we actually had discussed adding more meetings. And the reason being is because we find that we get towards the election and we don't have enough time during one meeting. And so we ended up, we actually added the work sessions because we wanted to be able to announce them at the end of at the beginning of the year. We can always cancel a meeting if we have very little on the agenda. We had discussed this. We said, okay, well, if we don't have enough on the agenda, or we can actually do this on at the next meeting, and we don't have to have a meeting, then we would cancel it. And that's the reason we added more, was so that we could have that option. And I think that keeping it the way it is imperative, so that we we have that time set aside, but we can always cancel it in the event that we do not have too much to put on. We can actually push stuff off if necessary. But we have found, we have in the past got caught with our proverbial pants down with, not having enough time or enough meeting time announced and so we made it a point to schedule those meetings, and then in the event we had to cancel them, we would.
Yeah, and again, let's just try to plan ahead, plan accordingly. There are a lot of times I think we could get answers by a simple email to the Bureau rather than having to discuss it. So that's all. Again, it's about time management. That's all I have on that. And then if you want the last one.
I did want to add just one other item on number 8. I'll be quick. When I first came on the board, we had more meetings than we have now, so more sometimes twice a month, because there were a lot of issues that we've resolved and put together a lot since I came on the board there. Anyways, we recognize the need for a lot. And then what happened was we got to the point where we said, you know what, we can back off now. And we got down to once a month, but we just discussed and deliberated that 2 times prior to election day, because a lot of votes come up prior to election day, voting on the proclamation, voting on the ballot, voting on the polls. They require the board votes. And so to have them, now we did cancel one time prior, one of the 2 prior to, it was an April election, I think, or a May election. And I'm open to really decreasing those 2. If we can eliminate one and say, hey, we don't need to have it, that would be great for the Bureau, because I know it is a busy time for them. And I'm always open to that. I'm always open. But I think it's important, as Ms. Fusaro said, to have them in case they're needed. Now, this past election, we had 2, and we had to add a special meeting because the proclamation wasn't ready for us to be voted on. So I think it comes down to the Bureau looking ahead. If you see there are 2 meetings and you want to have one eliminated, get everything ready for that one. Or say, and then say, we don't need that meeting because you voted on everything that you needed to vote on prior to the election day. So,
And we've done that before. We've canceled them too. Yeah.
so that's what I'm just saying. It's like, look ahead, and then to be able to cancel them, not to have to meet. It's really, can we get everything on one of those? And so that's all I wanted to add to that. Any other board members on that item? Okay, so we'll move to item number 9, the last item, which is election board meeting times, the preference for evening meetings. Mr. Morelli asked for this to be on the board for discussion.
Yep, and again, it's a small thing. Again, we talk about transparency to the public. I know there's times when we have to have a meeting if it's during the day, but if there's a time, if something's not urgent, I recommend that you have it in the evening. We'd had 2 meetings like at 10 o'clock in the morning, and again, it happens, but the fact is that if we're talking transparency, it should be in the evening. Most people work during the day, and we have to give them an opportunity. So that's just my thought. Try as much as we could to do them in the evening, even if it's at 5 o'clock. But if not, if we have to do it during the day, we could, but just something to think about.
No, the only time we have meetings during the day is during election time, adjudication, or a certification meeting. It's very, very rare that we have meetings during the day.
I know.
Or during we don't have them during the day. The only time, and we even changed, correct me if I'm wrong, we even changed recently, we changed it from 5 o'clock to 6 o'clock in order to accommodate the public and make sure that everybody was available to do that. And I understand for some board members, it is hard to make it during the day. And unfortunately, I mean, I have to take off work too, and it is difficult.
But do they have to be during the day?
I don't,
Well,
No.
I'd like to add to this.
So that's the point.
the
They don't have to be.
Evenings has always been a priority for the board. It has always been the goal. But what happens is certification meetings have to be by 5 p.m., usually the 3rd Monday after election day. And we always have brought it right up to that day. Now, there are legal notices that have to go out when you have a special meeting for certification. So you're looking ahead, like, when can we certify? When can we certify? Now, when you're doing this like 4 days or 5 days in advance of when you're going to certify, you're at the mercy of, is this room available in the evening on a Thursday night, or when it's going to be a Thursday night, probably at the earliest, before the Monday, because that we've never finished before that with the election adjudication process. And Thursday night's a big night in here. So if it's available, we would get that if we were done in time, but we're always brought up to the wire, and it has to be done by 5 p.m. on that Monday for the Pennsylvania Department of State. So that's why we haven't had an evening meeting. The other thing is, so it's room availability here on such short notice. 2, meeting the deadline for the statutory date for certification, and it's 5 p.m. on that Monday, so we can't go to the evening. But so those 2 things come into play, and that's often why it's had to be. That's the reason it's had to be a daytime meeting for those certification meetings. But the goal is always evenings. Yeah. So let's shoot for it. Let's shoot for getting adjudication done earlier, maybe being able to plan the Thursday evening, 6 o'clock certification meeting prior to the Monday statutory date.
You've got my vote.
Okay, all
There you
right.
go.
Okay, and then, hey, that could happen. It hasn't yet, but maybe it will. So we'll see. Okay, anybody else have anything on that agenda item? Okay, we'll move into comment on non-agenda items. This is an opportunity for members of the public to address the board on matters not listed on the agenda, but which must be within the subject matter jurisdiction of the board. It's limited to 3 minutes and 1 comment time per person. And again, we'll start with those who are in person. If anybody would like to speak, okay. Go. Just state your name. And
Joe
your-
Grantee, Plains Township. I have the answer to all this. I've been coming to these meetings for the last 4 or 5 elections. And 90% of the time is spent, and like tonight, 90% of the time is spent trying to fix the mail-in ballots and the drop box ballots. That's what it's all about. Deciding what signatures are good, what the procedures are. It's all about the mail-in ballots. Every meeting, you guys, you spend too much time here. You want to do other things, get rid of the drop boxes and the mail-in ballots. There is a place for mail-in ballots with people who cannot make it to the polls. Otherwise, the polls should be used for everyone else. And your job will be simpler. You won't have to do any of the adjudicating. You won't have to, I mean, it'll be a 10-minute job. That's all I got to say about that. Another thing I'd like to see is when you do vote here on different issues, could it be something that might be a secret vote? Because I noticed that a lot of times certain people will vote the way other people vote, right? And I don't think that's right for the pressure to be put on somebody to vote like their party. Okay? It would be better if everybody filled out a thing and then you read the votes. And then they don't have any idea of the way other people in their party are voting. Maybe they'll just vote for the right thing. And the third thing is, you mentioned a conference that you're going to. What conference is that and where is it at?
The board members, I think the Bureau leadership.
The Bureau. What conference is that and where is it at? And who's it with?
It's an election personnel conference,
In Luzerne
Pennsylvania.
County?
Not in Luzerne County, no.
Okay, so it's going to be with the Pennsylvania government?
Probably, Joe. They have meetings. They have stuff like that all the
Yeah.
time. They have conferences in Philadelphia and all over the place that and I'll see if I have it in my email to let you know, but it's really not for the general public.
Yeah,
It's just to discuss, honestly, it's to discuss who's using what vendor for paper and what they're doing with this and how and to feed off of one another to get better acquainted with how different counties run different elections so that
Right.
they can coordinate on our election process as from a state standpoint, from a constitutional standpoint. Pennsylvania state constitution dictates that we all run our elections. All 64 counties run the elections identical between each. And so it's important that we know what other counties are doing
Right.
and that we run them all the
So we
same.
haven't always
Okay,
run our.
Your time is up. Did you have
Well,
one?
I'm listening. I'm not.
Go ahead. Did you have anything else
Yes,
quickly?
our Constitution was not followed a few years ago. And, you know, when you get into these conferences, I don't know if it's to sway people to do certain things that aren't good for their citizens, and it doesn't look good. I
Okay,
mean,
thank you.
thank you.
In
I
the
do
back?
want to
in
mention
the
one
back?
more thing. Mail-in ballots, just Joe, and I feel for you. I'm right there with you. You know, I'm a hater of drop boxes, but the best thing to do for that kind of stuff, and I apologize, Mr. Griffin, you're not starting yet. Just just understand that that's a state, that's state. So no, but what you, no, it is. And you have to, Act 77 allows for mail-in balloting. So I would suggest that you visit the Senate and make your voice known down there.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank
We'll
you.
turn to the next gentleman here.
Greg
State your
Griffin,
name.
Swarsville.
Okay.
As the last citizen correctly stated, the big problem is mail-in ballots and drop boxes. Now, during the adjudication process, which I was present, it was discovered that 4 mail-in ballots came from a nursing home. And a witness at the nursing home signed all 4 ballots. But the 4 voters at the nursing home did not sign the ballots. The question is, did the 4 senior citizens all vote for the same candidates? I mean, were they coached? Mr. Hahn called the witness. Did the witness drop all 4? But he didn't ask, did the witness drop all 4 ballots in the drop box, which is illegal? Did the witness help with more than 4 ballots at the nursing home? Now, this is an issue where it's county-wide. There's a lot of nursing homes. Are these citizens that are, some of them almost incapacitated, being taken advantage of by people in the nursing homes, soliciting these ballots and signing the ballots? So this has to be investigated. A board member during the adjudication said it was a red flag. What happened with these 4 ballots? A red flag. Another board member even commented, it makes him question if someone else filled out the ballot selections for them. These are 2 board members right here. A 44th citizen was arrested for putting his mother's, for filling out his mother's ballot. So it's a crime. Is the election board or any board member going to ask for the district attorney to take a look at this? I mean, what happens? There's 4 ballots. It's been dropped. It's a red flag. The other board member said he thinks he has questions about whether or not these people even voted. The election board must ensure election integrity. Hold on to those 4 ballots because this is not over with. I'll be speaking about them a lot. This is the integrity. The people must be convinced in the mail-in process, which they don't believe in it, and the Dropbox ballots. I mean, did this guy at the nursing home drop 8 in the mailbox, in the Dropbox? And the chairwoman said public scrutiny is big. Yes, this is public scrutiny as far as these 4 ballots, which you didn't count, thankfully. But is that it? Oh, we're not going to count them, but we're not going to investigate the possible fraud. This has to be turned over to the district attorney. And let the district attorney call the witness in and say, hey, why don't you tell us what happened here? Who deputized you in a nursing home to go around and help with these ballots?
Thank you very much.
We'll be back on this issue.
Thank you. Is there some, go ahead.
Stephen J. Urban, Kingston. Listen, there's actually 67 counties, not 64.
I'm sorry.
Had to
I
correct
knew
you.
it after I said it and I felt like an idiot, but I figured I'm not going to correct myself.
I'm going to speak on a different issue regarding canvassing of write-in ballots, especially for local committee, Republican committee, or even Democratic committee. Looking at Title 25, Section 3167, it says, except as otherwise provided by law, the persons receiving the highest number of votes for any office at any election shall be declared elected to such office up to the number required by law to be elected there too. I mean, it's very short and brief. It's to my understanding that, the board decided to scatter some votes for write-ins when it comes to Republican committee. I know in the past, okay, so speaking on Republican committee, you only get 1 crack at the apple in the primary election. There, although you have a nomination process where you, in order to get your name on the ballot, you need 10 signatures. But for those that decide to do a write-in, you could potentially, the write-in person could potentially beat the person that's on the ballot, if that person's unpopular or whatever. Let's just say, just because somebody puts their name on the ballot with 10 signatures doesn't mean that they can't have a write-in campaign against them. And let's just say, there's no legal requirement to get 10 votes. You just need 10 voters to sign for you to get your name printed on the ballot. But what happens if the person printed on the ballot receives 5 votes and 2 other individuals mount a write-in campaign, both receive 7 votes? Should the person with 5 win the seat, or with those, would they lose by 2 votes to each of the individuals receiving the 7 votes? So how would you certify that? I know in the past, back in the commissioner days, when the commissioners wore the Board of Elections, it only took 1 vote, 1 write-in, if there was an open seat in any district or precinct, to win a seat for district committee or for precinct committee. The election certificate, or actually notice, would be sent out to that person. Do you want to accept the seat, yes or no? If they said yes, then an election certificate would be sent out to them, because the primary, like I said, is the general for that particular election. It's unique in that sense, where you're not competing against any other individual in November, unlike, county council or state rep race or any local races where there's a Republican and Democrat in a general election, or possibly independents running for office. Because these are political party positions, they don't tend to follow the same rules as the law states. Now, irregular ballots, I know that was cited at one time. What's the definition between an irregular and regular ballot? In my eyes, a regular ballot is using the machine that you have at the moment. You're typing the person's name in, you're printing off the ballot, you're putting it into the tabulator, and then, it's counted at the end of the day. The accumulation part, that's a separate, different issue. But I think the person receiving the highest number of votes should win that seat and get the certificate, and not be scattered.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, we have had lengthy discussions at board meetings. It's been on the agenda for that same subject and why we do that. And it's also in Title 25, that there is a minimum threshold of 10, just like the signatures for a write-in to, and if it were in the bylaws that it was different, I'm not aware of that either. And so in a regular ballot is a write-in ballot, is a regular vote, or is a write-in vote. That's the definition of a regular. Again, it's been on, you can look back through our minutes and read a lot of the minutes to see our discussion, and where we've referred, the solicitor at the time has referred to the election code on this. It's also, you could listen to and it's usually, I could say, tell you to look like within a month of an election. And I would recommend looking within the month of the last Democratic committee members being elected, because we had a lengthy discussion on it then, and we voted as a board on what we were going to do, and we made the decision based on the solicitor recommendation. And so when we discussed it again for the Republican committee people, we also took that into consideration, that we were going to be consistent with what we did with the Democratic committee members.
And I have to say that in reflection, and after talking to the state and everything else, I would have to agree with you, Mr. Urban. And my only suggestion is, at this point, that if someone's not willing to fight that with Luzerne County, that they should probably it should definitely be added into the bylaws. And that way Luzerne County has to count all of those votes. So I mean, that's the way, that's the only thing that I can say moving forward, that because in retrospect and in reflection, I mean, we had the same issue with the Democratic committee. They were very upset as well, but at the end of the day, we had to, what's good for the goose is good for the gander, and we had to do the right thing. But in retrospect and in reflection of the law and several things that you have shared with me on Title 25, I have to agree with you. So unfortunately, there's not much I can do about that right now. So we have certified this election.
Thank you. Next.
Did the election board send out certificates of election to winners of the Republican committee?
Yes.
Ms. Cook? Yes, that was it. Okay.
Madam Chair, just on that issue of certification, and I agree with Ms. Fasaro that a lot of this is a problem for the particular parties, and they probably should revise or amend their bylaws. But strictly on the term certification, you're correct. Number one, their regular ballots are write-ins. It's section 3155, and the very last section or sentence of that section, it states, in the primary, the county board shall not certify the votes cast on irregular ballots for any person for a, and then it lists all different offices. I'm not going to read them now, or election or local party office. So that would be in this particular case. I know we're talking about the Republican Party committee, unless the total number of votes cast for said person is equal to or greater than the number of signatures required on a nomination petition for that particular office. And again, in this particular example, it's 10.
Right, but when you're talking about a nomination petition, that's for a nomination petition. The problem is that's to get on the ballot to win for a primary moving on to November. We're talking about this is not an election, a primary election for committee. This is their election for committee, and we're Republican or Democrat. This is their election.
But they,
So
they
it's,
still had
and
a-
you can
but they still had to file nomination petitions.
right, but they would have to win. They could win with less than 10 votes though for their
But
election.
we can't certify them. That's all I'm saying. We don't certify them. I mean, again, the language is crystal clear that the board shall not certify the votes cast in irregular ballots for any person for election or local party office unless the total number of votes cast for said person is equal to or greater than the number of signatures required on a nomination petition for that office. So the nomination petitions that these people circulated, the requirement was 10. So that's
And
where
I
that comes from.
understand to
So-
get on the ballot, but then this is their actual election. It's
Right.
not for a
it-
nomination of
but-
the ballot of November.
But that's.
I
but
understand.
This applies to the local party offices. No, this contemplates that.
Ms. Williams, could I
Mhm.
quick question?
You can come up. You could be next for public comment. Go ahead. Wait until you get to the microphone because the public can't hear you if you're not.
Hold on one second, Mr. Fitzgerald. Manny, the mic is dead.
All right, so, but Ms. Williams, you said that unless the bylaws of the, TJ Fitzgerald, Newport Township. You're saying unless the Republican Party bylaws say differently, if the bylaws say differently, then it could be different, or is it superseded by state?
No, the state,
So whatever
code
our
supersedes it.
bylaws say, it doesn't matter,
We would not, the board would not certify it.
even if our bylaws said something differently.
Right, but the
Okay.
party can do whatever it wants. If it wants to have someone be victorious with
Without the
5
certification.
votes or right.
Without your
certification.
certification.
Right.
Okay,
That's correct. The party can do whatever it wants. This just simply says.
you're taking
the
my time
County
here.
board shall not certify.
I understand, and
Mhm.
I understood what you read.
Mhm.
But thank you. Okay, more or less, I am agreeing with Mr. Griffin, Mr. Griffin, Mr. Grantede. He's got things. The DA's got to take a look at this because, it's over the nation. As a matter of fact, 4 Connecticut campaign workers charged with mishandling of absentee ballots in 2019 mayor parade. Starting to hold all over. Honestly, there's a lot of fraud, and I'm not saying one party or the other, but we got to stop fraud. Okay, but I do want to say a couple things. Number one, you're talking about a lot of changes before this election. Who here thinks that this is the most important election in our lives? Everybody. This is the most important election? You agree? We had a pretty good thing. By the way, this cake is for Emily and the staff, and it's actually for the board too. I promised that if we had a good election, and we did, we had a pretty darn good election, I would bring a cake here. Emily, there's your cake. Okay. Denise, there's your cake. And, when I have to eat humble pie, I'll eat it. Okay. I'm very proud of you guys. Okay. It wasn't perfect, but I don't think we'll ever have perfect, but it was damn good. Thank you. Okay. I think we're moving forward. I always had a problem with hiring people because of friendship and nepotism. Luzerne County, I've always hated that. Okay. But back when I was protesting, I actually said she should have got the job. Okay. So anyway, how many people, I'm going to go back to when I told Congress, when I testified about the shit show that happened.
Manny,
Just
do you
wait.
have batteries back there?
Okay, we're just
Can
gonna
you
hold a
pause
second.
this?
Oh, yeah, I'll give them another.
We paused your time, just so you know. Manny is the unsung superhero.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah, I'm gonna give you back I'm gonna give you back to 30
We'll
seconds. You
figure
were
it
down
out.
to
You,
10.
you always
Go
are
ahead.
very fair with the time. How many employees were working during that election? Ballpark. Well, can you give me a ballpark, 5, 10, 20? Is there more now
which
or
one?
less? That's when the paper shortages happened.
There were way more than there are now.
There are way more?
Yeah, than there were
Okay,
this
no, I'm not,
last election.
I'm not the most intelligent person in the world, but I do try to figure stuff out. And I always predict bombshells, okay? Not literal bombshells, because my way of speaking, but
Okay, just
there's
kind of wrap it up.
going to be a problem in this thing. I'm predicting that if we change policies and procedures before the most important election that we've ever had, and we add more stuff to the election bureau with less staff, we're causing a problem. I wouldn't do that in my business. I wouldn't add work to the bureau when we have less employees. We shouldn't be taking stuff away from the board. We don't change anything right now. We can't change anything. We just had a successful campaign. Put everything on a back burner. You're doing well. Keep on doing what you're doing. Because if there is shit show, we're going to look like assholes again, idiots again. I don't want that. I want to bring another cake next election.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. I
Okay?
gave you
So
extra
don't
time.
change anything.
Are we,
Thank
correct me if I'm wrong, is the Bureau adding more staff?
Mhm.
You are?
Yeah,
That's a
they
yes.
are.
So there's gonna be more people in the Bureau.
I'm sorry?
There's gonna be more people. They're adding staff in the Bureau.
Okay.
Tenure is going to be simple.
Thank
That was
you.
one of the things that one of the people in Congress talked about, that the tenure in the bureau was 2 years.
Thank you. The public can't hear you when you're speaking from there, so I prefer that we only speak when you're at the microphone in your allotted time. Is there somebody else who would like to speak next, who is in person? Go ahead.
Audrey Cernak. I live in Plains Township. Well, no big surprise. First, I'd like to say that I support mail-in ballots. They are the law. They are legal. I love using my mail-in ballot. I also support the drop boxes. For me, that's the most secure way of getting my ballot to the Bureau. It goes from my hand filled out into the drop box. No intermediaries in the post office. Also like to say that transparency is very, very important here. And the Sunshine Law does require all votes be taken in public. On my past experience in the board, I don't believe anybody has ever not voted their conscience. Okay. As far as the ballots, those 4 ballots, there's always something that comes up with these votes of people putting more than one ballot in or or whatever. And the board, I know, has gotten criticism in the past for turning everything over to the DA's office. They're very busy. And it's, oh, we can't, you're pushing all this off onto the DA. I don't know whether the best thing to do is for the board to investigate this themselves. We can. I know we've done some investigating in the past. Some of the board members have on different issues, but I don't know, again, whether you're going to make that decision to turn something like that over to the DA or not. As far as the fraud goes with the man who registered his deceased mother, the system did work there because he never did vote that ballot. They stopped him before he could fill one out and get it. So the system does work pretty well as far as the fraud goes here. We haven't had any really major problems that way. Again, I do support the drop boxes, and I commend the board for their transparency. Again, I think it's very important that meetings are scheduled in the evening whenever possible, but I think it's also very important, again, for transparency, that this council room be used, because again, that's the Zoom link. That's where everybody can, if they have the time, sign in and see what's going on. Fewer meetings, that would be lovely. But again, it's very important that this council room is reserved so that people can call in, can participate by Zoom or by phone. Better to cancel those meetings if they're extra rather than not have that full participation by the public. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else in person like to speak? I don't see any hands up. Anybody on the Zoom platform wish to speak? Just click the hand bar. If you're on a phone, there is one person on a phone now. Just go ahead and jump in. I'll give you, and to unmute, it'd be, well, I think it's *6 to unmute. Doesn't appear that anybody's hand is up or that anyone on a phone line is unmuting to speak.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, motion to adjourn is made by Ms. Fasaro. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Schlosser. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, meeting is adjourned. It's 8:07 p.m.
If
Thank you,
anybody wants
everybody.
cake, come
Please
get
turn
it.
off your microphones.